Mick Mulvaney, Trump's former chief of staff, said in 2020, "My party is very interested in deficits when there is a Democrat in the White House. The worst thing in the whole world is deficits when Barack Obama was president. Then Donald Trump became president, and we're a lot less interested in deficits as a party. We don't care at this point." And here's a guy I've mentioned numerous times, Thomas Massie, a Republican member of the House, said earlier this year about Republicans, "We have no plan whatsoever to balance the budget other than growth. But what they're proposing is going to make deficits worse." This is what our president is trying to do with the complicity of a lot of people who call themselves deficit hawks, who call themselves fiscal conservatives. They're going to try to blow it through here, gaming the system, creating some kind of scam to obscure the real cost of this, when we all know, them on the Republican side, us on the Democratic side, we all know the truth about these tax increases and what they're going to do, how much they're going to cost. But we're going to play a game, it looks like, here, unless more Americans speak up. Republican and Democrat, people who know numbers, who know what we're doing to future generations in this country. This is wrong, and I say again, this is not right or left, it is right or wrong. This is a moral moment in America. What are we going to do? I'm so glad my friend, the senator from Hawaii, is here. I try to keep M&Ms in my desk occasionally if she wants to partake of New Jersey's state product. The M&M was invented in Newark. Truth? Get great trivia here. I'm waiting for the senator from Hawaii, my dear friend, to ask me a question, because I have the floor.
Will the senator yield to a question?
I will yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned M&Ms. Both of us are lawyers, and I remember I got through the studying for the bar exam by eating mounds and mounds of M&Ms. So I thank you, the senator from New Jersey, for continuing to provide me with M&Ms. I want to thank you, Senator Booker, for standing here for hours on end to push back, to fight against this administration's lawlessness. And in fact, a reporter asked me today, do you think this is a good use by Senator Booker of his time to be on the floor to do this? And I said, anytime any of us gets up and use our voices to counter, to fight against the lawlessness of this administration, it is a good use of our time. So thank you, Senator Booker, for yielding to me and for standing up to the American people. And is it making a difference? Millions of people are watching you, Senator Booker. Millions have watched and are watching you. It's making a difference. So I want to ask you a question about the lawlessness of this administration. As you yourself said last night, quote, "These are not normal times in our nation," end quote. In fact, these are the very words that I often use when I meet with anybody who comes to see me from Hawaii, individuals, organizations. I say, these are not normal times. So Donald Trump has made no secret of the fact that he fancies himself a king with total disregard for the rule of law. And from day one, he and his administration have taken one illegal action after another. On his first day in office, Donald Trump issued an executive order purporting to end birthright citizenship, a right protected in our Constitution for more than a century. Birthright citizenship. He tried to unilaterally freeze federal funding for everything from cancer research to disaster aid, funding that had already been appropriated by Congress and that the executive branch is required by law to spend. It is not as though it's up to the president to decide what programs he's going to release money for. Congress already made that determination. By law, he is supposed to expend these funds. But again, He thinks he's the king. He can do whatever he wants. So he's put a freeze on these funds. He's enabled Elon Musk, an unelected billionaire, the richest person in the world, whose only qualification is the more than $200 million he spent to get Trump elected, to run roughshod through our government. Together, they've attempted to shutter USAID and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, just for two examples. This Consumer Protection Bureau, which has returned more than $21 billion to consumers through its enforcement actions. $21 billion going to our consumers. And apparently King Trump can't stand that, and neither can Elon Musk. These are agencies that do critical work at home and abroad and represent just a minuscule part of the federal budget, but this doesn't stop either Trump or Musk from going after these programs. And Musk's so-called Doge team has gained access to sensitive databases and payment systems across our government containing the personal information of millions of Americans. So he has access to the Treasury Department database, all our Social Security numbers, our tax payments, all of that. He is running roughshod until stopped by a court on these databases. And they've done all this without any transparency or accountability whatsoever, meaning we still don't know the full extent of where Doge has been or what they've done. Trump has launched an all-out assault on our federal workforce. He attempted to fire tens of thousands, he actually fired them, who are on probationary status overnight, and only for courts to order them, these thousands and thousands of federal employees in probationary status, to be reinstated weeks later. Talk about chaos, talk about sowing fear. So now he's attempting to reclassify whole swaths of federal employees to strip them of civil service protections and in some cases eliminate their ability to bargain collectively. He fired Department of Justice and FBI officers for seemingly no other reason than their involvement in January 6 cases. Cases they were assigned to as rank and file officials, not as though these people at DOJ and FBI had a choice in the kind of cases they were going to be assigned. They were assigned January 6 cases, and the names of these people, there's some 6,000 FBI and DOJ employees who worked on January 6 cases, and there's a fear that those names would be disclosed. He's going after schools, from kindergartners to universities, as part of his war on diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are many examples of the kind of government overreach that they are exercising through their effort to ferret out what they call diversity, equity, and inclusion, which actually, that is a positive. Don't we want to be inclusive? So I want to give you just one example. There was a teacher in Idaho who had a poster in her classroom that said, "Everyone is welcome here." And there were handprints, different colors, white, black, yellow, handprints. And she was told she had to take this poster down, and that if the handprints were all white handprints, she could have kept the poster up, but she was told she had to take this poster in her classroom that says, "Everyone is welcome here." She took it down at first, but she felt so bad about it that she put it back up, and then she was told by the powers that be at her school that she had a certain amount of time to take this poster down, and otherwise there will be disciplinary action. That is the kind of government overreach that is a hallmark of this administration. To date, the Trump administration has withheld millions of dollars from hand-picked colleges and universities. conditioning the funding on unreasonable demands meant to bring these colleges to their knees. So he's starting with Harvard, Columbia. There's probably a whole long list of colleges that he's threatened to withdraw hundreds of millions of dollars from. They've slashed funding or staffing at the Department of Education. In fact, they would like to dismantle the Department of Education, which is responsible for administering billions in funding for low-income students, students with disabilities, and something as critical as school lunch for kids. Every single state in our country relies on the funding they receive from the U.S. Department of Education. In Hawaii, we're talking about some $300 million in funding for our schools to help our kids with disabilities, to provide school lunches through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the things that I mentioned. And as Senator Booker knows well, the list goes on and on. This administration continues to abuse its power, acting with total disregard for the rule of law. And we have turned to the courts to stop these illegal acts. And now Republicans are calling to impeach these judges who are applying the law, who are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and not just giving Trump whatever results he wants, but these judges are now deemed open to impeachment. It's clear Trump and his cronies will keep on doing whatever they want, regardless of the Constitution or the law. They are crippling government and sowing total chaos across our country while doing nothing to address the actual issues people care about. I know my colleague from New Jersey is just as concerned about lawlessness as I am. We both sit on the Judiciary Committee. We know how important adherence to the rule of law is. And in fact, I have said many times that it is the rule of law that separates the democracy from all other forms of government. And we now have a president who does not think that the rule of law applies to him. WTF comes to mind. So, Senator Booker, my question to you is, what are the consequences of this total lawlessness on our government, our country, and the American people?
Thank you, Senator Hirono. I think I need somebody to say what WTF, and to come from you is particularly precious and great. I'm grateful. And this rule of law is really important. It's part of this whole moment in American history that I keep calling a moral moment, something beyond the normal, where we shouldn't respond in a normal fashion. This is a moment where judges rule in his favor, and he praises them. They just don't rule for him. He drags them and threatens them, so much so that Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has to tell them to back up. When elected officials, speak up, many of them fear what the consequences would be for them or their reelection if they speak against him. Lawyers decline, possibly, to represent people because they're worried that this president has already showed that if you represent the wrong people or represent, God forbid, people against him, he's going to try to shut down your law firm in ways that are against the rules of law that this country believes in. Journalists and media organizations, they don't report in a way that he likes or confirm his arbitrary name changes of the Gulf of Mexico. There's a punishment that he dishes out to try to make them succumb to submission. State and local governments literally could get extorted for their funding if they don't carry out his demands. Schools and universities who are starving for dollars, trying to invest them in research and science that will propel humanity to new heights, well, they could get targeted by this president if you don't do what he says. It feels like his ultimate goal is to create a country where you cannot trust the outcome of elections that he loses, because he's going to tell you if he lost that election, it's the big lie. It's wrong. I won. I don't care what judge after judge, court after court says. I won. And if you don't believe me, if you don't say that the election I won, well, there'll be consequences for that too. This is a president who, even as we've read, people on both sides of the aisle isn't respecting the Constitution, the separation of powers, isn't respecting the rights that we hold precious, isn't honoring what you call the rule of law. I want to go a little bit into this for a second. Let's talk about the separation of powers. There's many, many different cases right now. But we know that James Madison, the founding father who devised the basic framework of our Constitution, devoted some of the Federalist Papers to the ways the Constitution addresses the danger of concentrating too much power in one person or one branch of government. Written in 1788, Madison's words still have resonance today. This is what he wrote in Federalist 487. The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. And so what is this president trying to do? He's trying to jam any court decision that's not in his favor, and either the judge is corrupt and should be impeached, or he's just going to deny the ruling or not follow it. Madison explained that the Constitution set up the executive, legislative, and judiciary branches to be separate and distinct and equal and bound together by checks and balances. Quote, "It is agreed on all sides that the powers properly belonging to one of the branches ought not to be directly and completely administered by either of the other branches. It is equally evident that none of them ought to possess directly or indirectly an overruling influence over the others in the administration of their executive respective powers." That's Federalist 48. I'm nerdy enough to have a favorite Federalist paper. I'm going to read from my favorite one, Federalist 51. In order to lay a due foundation for the separate and distinct exercise of the different powers of government essential to the preservation of liberty, it is evident that each department should have a will of its own, so constituted that each should have as little agency as possible in the appointment of the members of the others. But the great security against a gradual concentration of the several powers in the same department consists in giving to those who administer each department the necessary constitutional means to resist the encroachments of the others. To resist the encroachments of the others. We're not doing that in the Senate or in the House. It may, Federalist 51 continues, it may be a reflection on human nature that such devices should be necessary to control the abuses of government. And here's the quote, folks. Here's the quote from our founders. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. But our president is no angel. In framing a government, this is 51 continuing, in framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the government, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. They are talking about, at great length, our founders and the separation of powers and the checks and balances of these institutions, and yet for 72 days of this administration has the Congress, Article 1, the People's House, the Senate, the deliberative body, have we once held this president to account? The most powerful man in the world and the richest man in the world have taken a battle axe to the Veterans Association, a battle axe to the Department of Education, a battle axe to the only agency solely focused on protecting consumers against big banks and other factors that might abuse them, bringing it down. Congress established the Department of Education. Congress established the Consumer Finance Bureau. Congress. But the president doesn't care. He's going to push as hard as he can against the principles of our founders. And what will we do in this body? What will we do in the House of Representatives? Right now, the answer is nothing. Has Elon Musk, the unelected, un-Senate confirmed, billionaire #1 campaign contributor of Donald Trump, who has admitted he's made mistakes. Heck, his website, he keeps taking down the mistakes, keeps getting called out from them, fires people from the FAA, then begs them to come back, fires the people that protect us from nuclear accidents. Oh, wait, come back. Has we ever in the Senate or the House called him in for one oversight hearing to account for what he's doing, to address the fears of a nation? No. Separation of powers. Hey, we have hearings here all the time, but not Elon Musk. You know why? You know why I think why? Tell me I'm a conspiracy theorist. Because what Elon Musk is doing to some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle is threatening them. Threatening to run primaries with what to me would be a quarter, but to him is $100 million. I'm going to drop $100 million against you in a primary if you step out of line. Or if you dare to say Hegseth is not qualified to be the Secretary of Defense, we're going to drag you through X. We're going to awaken a mob to threaten you. Our founders spoke so eloquently to protect against that kind of corruption, to protect against that kind of egregious tyrannical power that says, only I can save this country. Give me all power. Let me be the strong man. And we know who he respects on the global stage. I was stunned. I thought it was a joke during the election when he said his favorite leader is Viktor Orban, who's rolled back democratic principles, who's concentrated power. I see, who does he choose to call a dictator? The man who is trying desperately to lead his country in defense against the authoritarian dictator and preserve his democracy? Or does he call the dictator a dictator? No. Simple test. Most high school students would simply pass it, but no. He calls a hero a dictator. Do we have any conversations about that in an informal capacity? To talk about the Ukrainian war, which I know people on both sides of the aisle. Mazie Hirono brings up the separation of powers. Why is history's lesson so relevant today? Why do we study history? Why did I learn that in high school, that you study history so you don't repeat the mistakes of the past? You study history to gain inspiration and insight and courage against tough times. You study history to be inspired by heroes who stood up against despots, who sacrificed themselves. What is the lesson in history? How is it relevant to us today? Because the separation of powers between the branches of government has allowed our democracy to thrive for nearly 250 years. And now we have a person in power that's barely being checked. And if the courts check him, what he does to the courts? In the 9 weeks or 10 weeks since Donald Trump was inaugurated, there have been more than 140 federal lawsuits filed challenging his actions. I don't know if another president has, in my lifetime, ever has had 140 federal lawsuits in about 9 weeks. It's a staggering figure. We should consider it a staggering figure. He must be the most sued president in U.S. history. Somebody should fact check that. But at least in my lifetime, I don't remember Reagan, don't remember Bush, don't remember Obama or Clinton or Biden being dragged into court in the first 9 weeks so many times and losing case after case. He may have a record for the most lawsuits filed by a president himself, because he's a guy that says he loves to sue folks. In support of the big lie, he did so many lawsuits and lost them all. The lawsuits against Trump and his administration are not frivolous. Federal judges appointed by Republican presidents and Democratic presidents alike have found Trump's executive actions illegal, temporarily pausing many of them too. Trump's executive actions and the outcomes of these lawsuits have a direct effect on Americans. These lawsuits challenge Trump. Here are some of the examples, folks. And I'm wondering where the American people stand on these lawsuits, not the people who are blindly loyal to him because they believe the lies that he so artfully, creatively, and convincingly tells, but just tell me, where do you stand on these issues? Attacks on veterans who have served our country in the military and civil services. Well, there are lawsuits challenging his right to attack our veterans. There's lawsuits challenging Trump on his attacks on government agencies that protect your grandmother from online scams. I don't know where you stand with the grandmas getting scammed, to defend them or the president. Lawsuits against Trump because of his attacks on lawful American citizens born in this country and guaranteed their citizenship under the U.S. Constitution. There are lawsuits against the president for withholding National Institute of Health funds to support studies of horrific diseases like Alzheimer's and disrupting life-saving medical research and ongoing clinical trials. Now, if you're a student of history, this is the problem often with lawsuits. Brown versus Board of Education, we celebrated as this wonderful case. It was. But was it obeyed? No, it wasn't. I have a picture of Ruby Bridges in my office because it wasn't obeyed. The court didn't declare this, and suddenly everybody said, hey, let black folk go to school with white folks. No, the president had to call in the National Guard to escort a little girl into a class. That's the problem with lawsuits, is you have a defiant executive leadership, they'll defy them. These, where you stand? Do you stand with veterans? Do you stand with your grandmothers against online scams? Do you stand with American citizens born in this country? Do you stand with withholding National Institute of Health funding? It was clearly that. We know the majority of Americans are with that. But people are having to bring him to court to fight on these issues. So many cases being done. So many cases I have here before me. So many cases. I could read them all, but you all know many of them. They're done in the press as he pushes, as Elon Musk push. They push the bounds of the authorities of the Constitution of the United States, and people are bringing lawsuits. But that is not enough. Martin Luther King didn't step down because of Thurgood Marshall's legal work. John Lewis didn't step down. Ella Baker didn't stop. Abraham Joshua Heschel didn't stop. The great Rabbi Joachim Prince didn't stop. The people of the United States of America, more powerful than courts, the people of the United States of America, more powerful than the Constitution. I just said something controversial, so let me defend myself. I believe in the people. I believe in the words of the great learned hand. He said the like of what I just said, so let me read somebody far greater, far more vaunted than this senator from New Jersey. Learned Hand serves as a federal judge from 1909 to 1951. He was nicknamed the 10th Justice of the Supreme Court for his many influential decisions. And he wrote this speech about our Constitution, about our liberties, about the tyrants in every generation who have tried to subvert our democracy. Some of them from this body, like the Red Scare that had so many Americans being unjustly fired, unjustly deported, unjustly jailed, that infringed on freedom of speech, freedom of expression. I'm sorry, every generation of Americans have seen demagogues rise to try to undermine what American stands for. And Learned Hand knew that. He had so much wisdom about our Constitution. We are gathered here to affirm a faith in a common purpose, a common conviction, a common devotion. Some of us have chosen America as the land of our adoption. The rest have come from those who did the same. For this reason, we have some right to consider ourselves a picked group, a group of those who had the courage to break from the past and brave the dangers and the loneliness of a strange land. What was the object that so nerved us, or those who went before us, to this choice? We sought liberty, freedom from oppression, freedom from want, freedom to be ourselves. This is what we sought. This we now believe that we are by way of winning. What do we mean when we say that, first of all, we seek liberty? I often wonder whether we do not rest our hopes too much upon constitutions, upon laws, and upon our courts. These are false hopes. Believe me, these are false hopes. Liberty lies in the hearts of men and women. When it dies there, no constitution, no law, no court can save it. No constitution, no law, no court can even do much to help it. While it lies in our hearts, there it needs no constitution, no law, no court. And what is this liberty which must lie in the hearts of men and women? Please, please, please listen to what he writes next. What is this liberty which must lie in the hearts of us Americans? This is what he says next. It is not the ruthless, the unbridled will. It is not freedom to do as one likes. That is the denial of liberty and leads straight to its overthrow. A society in which men recognize no check upon their freedom soon becomes a society where freedom is a possession of only a savage few, as we have learned in this country to our sorrow. What then is the spirit of liberty? I cannot define it. I can only tell you my own faith. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which is not too sure that it is right. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which seeks to understand the minds of other men and women. The spirit of liberty is a spirit which weighs their interest alongside its own without bias. The spirit of liberty remembers that not even a sparrow falls to earth unheeded. The spirit of liberty is a spirit of him who, near 2,000 years ago, taught mankind that lesson it has never learned, but has never quite yet forgotten, that there may be a kingdom where the last shall be heard and considered side by side with the greatest. And now, in the spirit of that great America for which our young men are at this moment fighting and dying, in that spirit of a liberty and America, I ask you to rise and say with me the pledge of our faith in the glorious destiny of our beloved country. I now ask you to raise your hands and repeat after me this pledge. And he says, the Pledge of Allegiance. He believed that the Constitution dies if the spirit of it dies in the hearts of men and women. I will tell you, this Constitution has saved my life. It made my life because people marched to make real on the promise of our democracy. People bled to make real on this democracy. When some people told us that this Constitution didn't apply for us, this body, Republicans in America stood up and said, no, President Johnson, we're going to do amendments. We saw the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment would guarantee my ancestors finally full citizenship in the United States of America and the protections of the Constitution. I am here in this body because of past generations that fought to uphold the Constitution, not because the Constitution was real to them, but because they brought reality and hope and love and promise to the Constitution. They were Americans that said, like Langston Hughes, America never was America to me, but I swear this oath, America will be. They loved this country so much even when it didn't love them back. I am here because of that. I'm the fourth black person popularly elected to this body because of generations that believed so much in this document that they were going to make it real. It lived in them. I quoted earlier today. It's worth quoting here again. The great Margaret Chase Smith, a U.S. Senator from Maine, a Republican, in her famous Declaration of Conscience speech, delivered on June 1st, 1950. Thank you, my good senator friend Whitehouse, because Lord knows I would have slipped and fallen on my tuchus and have ended this long filibuster because I fell to the floor. That's what you mean when the brother has your back. What did this Republican say in a time of tyranny in her times, in a time where the Constitution stopped living in people's hearts, where people believed that whipped up fears of others by demagogues, where people believed the fear that they heard again and again on the radio, that we should fear other Americans, when people believed their fear justified them inhibiting the greatness of the Constitution. What's that old saying from one of our great leaders of the past? If you're willing to give up your liberty in order to ensure your security, you will lose them both. And so here was this courageous Republican who, in a time that demagogues were whipping up fear, where First Amendment rights were being trampled, where people were being intimidated into silence, where people were afraid to go up against the big and the powerful and the rich, where people were being deported from our country, where Jews were being deported and accused of being communists as justification to take them out of the country because they didn't have permanent legal status. Yeah, that's our history. What did she stand up and say in the Senate? This Republican putting her own career at risk to call out Senator McCarthy. She said, I don't believe the Republican Party is in any sense a party of fear. I do believe that the Republican Party has made an alliance, though, with the four horsemen of fear. The fear of communists, the fear of labor unions, the fear of the future, and the fear of progress. There are people fear-mongering now. There are people trying to tell Americans to hate Americans, either with the great dear leader or you're a danger and an enemy. And it's not just Democrats that are being drugged. There are being other Republicans. I saw it happen. I saw it happen to one of our vice president's daughters, a congresswoman. I saw it happen to colleagues of mine like Jeff Flake, like John McCain, like Corker, who stood up in this body and told the truth about dear leader, and they saw the consequences politically. You want to talk about where the Constitution lives and defending the Constitution? First, make it real in your heart, like those women did before the amendment that granted them the right to vote, who loved this country so much. You want to know where the Constitution lives in your heart? I just met with extraordinary men and women who are Native Americans to this country, were here before any of us. They love this country so much, even with the sins against them. You want to know where the Constitution lives? Let it live in the hearts of all Americans now, and ask yourself, is the leader of our country, is he living the Constitution in his heart? Because his learned hand says it's not braggadocious, it's not mean, it is loving, it is kind, it is expansive. We are Americans. Our creed, above the presiding elder, says it all, e pluribus unum, trying to remind our country that despite racial difference, gender, besides Republican or Democrat, ethnics, you know all the lines that divide us are not nearly as strong as the ties that bind us. That's what e pluribus unum means. What about the pledge that Learned Hand read? Listen to the words. It says things. It says things in that pledge. It says that we are one nation under God, that we are indivisible, and we pledge ourselves to liberty and justice, not just to the people who agree with the president, but for all. God bless my courageous colleagues who have spoken out in the past and suffered the consequences. The liberty and the Constitution lives in their hearts. They put patriotism over politics. We are in this moral moment now. We are in this moral moment now. This is not right or left. Don't let them say this is a partisanship. It is not. It is not left or right. It is right or wrong. America, this is a moral moment. Does the Constitution live in your heart?
Or a question.
Before I yield, I love this power trip. It's the only time in 13 years that I've really felt this power. I don't have to let my colleagues speak. And I, first amongst us all, really love to speak. I just want to say thank you to Chris Murphy. I repeated this 10, 15 hours ago, but I just want to tell the story, and then I'll let you go, Chris. 9 years ago on this floor, after the Pulse shooting, we called Chuck Schumer, Chris and I saw a moment, he saw a moment that we couldn't do business as usual. We just said, how can you have this mass shooting, yet another mass shooting, and this body just go on as business as usual? It's why I'm standing here right now. And we agreed, with the Chuck Schumer's help, that we would get control of the Senate. And Chris Murphy went down to that desk, and I promised him, I'll be with you, I'll stand with you, I won't sit down, we'll go as long as we possibly can. And he began a filibuster 9 years ago, and it lasted 15 hours, and he still had fuel in the tank. I know he did. I was a hurting guy. I told you my back was hurting, my feet were hurting. But we had a direct end when Mitch McConnell agreed to give us votes on common sense gun safety, which I think every American, most gun owners agree on, just universal background checks. And it failed to get 60 votes in the Senate, but you stood, and I stood with you. And he said to me days ago, if you're going to do this, brother, I will be your aide-de-camp this time, and you've been with me. You have been with me far past 15 hours. You've been with me for 23 hours and 49 minutes. Although my cousin Pam in the gallery, she's been here the same amount of time. All right, so I'm going to yield my power. It's not going to go to my head. This is why we need separation of powers, checks on men, because men are not angels. I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Senator Booker, it has been a wonder to be with you on the floor these last 24 hours. You indeed did something extraordinary and performed a sympathy filibuster with me 9 years ago, where as I stood at that desk for 15 hours, you stood on the Senate floor. You didn't need to, but you did in solidarity. I have been with you for the last 24 hours, but I've sat for most of it. You've done the hard work. You are an extraordinary senator. You are an extraordinary American. And I think I can say on behalf of everyone in this chamber and many people in the gallery, you are an extraordinary friend. And so I think all of us feel privileged to be here with you at this moment of peril, this moment of danger, this moment of opportunity for the nation, but also this moment of history. On August 28, 1957, at about 8:45 p.m., Strom Thurmond took this floor. And he took the floor with the intent of trying to block the 1957 Civil Rights Bill. This was the most significant, really the only civil rights bill that had been before the United States Senate in 90 years. Most famously, about 10 years before, when he was running for president as a Dixiecrat, he had said, "There's not enough troops in the Army to force the Southern people to break down segregation and admit the Negro race into our theaters, into our swimming pools, into our homes, and into our churches." And he sat on this floor for just over 24 hours, and he made the case for why this nation should continue to segregate black and white. He started, in fact, by reading every single state's voting rights laws. Every single state's laws he read into the record, apparently as proof that every state adequately protected all of its voters and that no additional laws were necessary. He had friends in his cause to preserve segregation that came down to the floor and asked him long questions to give him breathers. At the end of that 24 hours, at around 9 p.m. the following night, he could go no longer. His final words in his 24-hour record-breaking filibuster were, "I expect to vote against the bill." But within hours, the bill passed. It became law. It established the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Justice. It was not nearly enough, but it broke 90 years of inaction. What you have done here today, Senator Booker, couldn't be more different than what occurred on this floor in 1957. Strom Thurmond was standing in the way of inevitable progress towards equal political and economic rights for black Americans. It was inevitable only because the people of this nation were standing up at that moment, the beginning of the civil rights movement, to make clear that progress was inevitable. And I say that that moment is so different from this moment because today you are standing in the way not of progress, but of retreat. You are standing in the way of retreat from the rule of law, retreat from our commitment to provide care to the most vulnerable, retreat from our common cause, at least we used to be in common cause, that we would have zero tolerance from corruption at the highest levels of government. And you have recognized rightly that this multifaceted retreat from everything that makes this country so special, and the speed of that retreat over the last 71 days, it is an exceptional moment. You've said that word over and over again. It is not normal what this administration has been doing to rob from us the values that used to unite left and right in this nation. And so you made this bold decision to engage in an exceptional tactic, to declare 24 hours ago that you were going to stand on this floor for as long as you could to try to raise the specter of failure in our fight against this retreat for our colleagues and for the American public. The exceptional nature we have heard so eloquently from you over the course of the last 24 hours, the massive transfer of wealth in this reconciliation bill from the poor and the middle class to the wealthy, the industrial scale harassment of journalists, of universities, of law firms, the destruction of the independence of the Department of Justice, the destruction of the American knowledge economy and the research economy, the use of the White House in violation of the Constitution to make those in power richer. You have laid out the case. And it's funny, I remember this from 9 years ago. When you're sitting in your spot, you haven't moved in 24 hours, you have no idea what's happening outside of this building. You don't actually know how many people in this country have engaged in the conversation that you started 24 hours ago. On one social media platform alone, there have been 150 million clicks on your live stream. This is a country of 300 million Americans. You have been able to pique a conversation here amongst our colleagues, who we need to stand with us eventually against this retreat, and across this country. And I think we are here as we reach a pivotal hour to just say thank you for having the courage, the audacity to bring us on this journey. And so my question is pretty simple. I think you will find when you finally leave this chamber that you have done something extraordinary, that you didn't solve the problem, that we are still a long ways from being able to successfully beat back this retreat, but that you have accomplished something extraordinary. And so I guess that's just my question. When you set out with this idea, when this was starting to germinate in your mind, my question for you, Senator Booker, is what did you hope to accomplish?
I thank my colleague and my friend again. He and I talked about this, that I was challenged by my own constituents to do something different, challenged by my own constituents to do something, challenged by my own constituents to take risks. My staff here, who should get a lot of credit for making it thus far, I'm not sitting down, but I'm mindful of what you said about Strom Thurmond. I'm mindful of that right now as I watch that clock tick for another 20 minutes. I'm grateful for my staff. I'm grateful for the parliamentarians, the clerks. I'm grateful for the Republican presiding officers. I don't know if I want to out Curtis on the note that the good senator on the presiding officer, forgive me, on the note he sent me, but this is the kind of specialness in this place that I love. I want to tell a few connecting stories. I think some of my colleagues know a few of these, but I want to explain why I started this whole 24 hours talking about John Lewis and good trouble. 60 years ago, when he was on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, he shook New Jersey as he shook the nation. When Bloody Sunday happened, there was a white guy on a couch in New Jersey who was watching TV and was so shaken. This lawyer said, I gotta go to Alabama. He realized he couldn't afford a plane ticket. So this man slumped back down on his couch, and then he said, at a moral moment in America, I'm not gonna let my inability to do everything undermine my determination to do something different. And he got up and said, okay, it was a meager calculation, but it was different. I can afford 1 hour a month of pro bono work. And he called around and he found this woman named Lee Porter, who was heading up an organization called the Fair Housing Council, and said, can you use a lawyer? And she's like, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus. Yeah, we need some help. And they worked together and they designed a sting operation where they would send black families in areas of New Jersey that would not sell homes to black people, where usually the best public schools were. And if they were told the house was sold, they'd send a white couple behind them to expose that the house was still for sale and expose all of this. Well, they had a lot of success getting things written about the severe housing discrimination in my state. And he said that after about 4 years, I got this case file of a black family trying to move to New Jersey, and they were frustrated because every time they'd look at homes in the places, the best public schools, which happened to be white communities, they said they couldn't find a home. So they did the sting operation. They sent the black couple in. They were told this incredible house was not for sale. They loved the house, so when the white couple went, they just threw in a bid to see if it would be accepted. The bid was accepted. Papers were drawn up on the day of the closing. The white couple did not show up. The black man did. Lawyer Marty Friedman marched in, confronted the real estate agent. You would think 1969, a year after the Fair Housing Act, that he would capitulate, but he didn't. This lawyer gets up so angry, this real estate agent gets up so angry, he punches the lawyer in the face and sings a Doberman Pinscher on the black guy. They get out of there shaken up, and they start writing letters back and forth. The good owners of the home found out what was going on. They were so aghast. They said, let us sell the house directly to the black family. The black family moved in. And 43 years later, the baby from that family became the 4th popularly elected black senator in our country, me. Now, I tell that story because I started with John Lewis 24 hours ago, and it was John Lewis and a bunch of marchers on a bridge that influenced the destiny of my life and my family's life. We're all interconnected. As King says, we're all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in that common garment of destiny. But I want to tell you the second time John Lewis shook up my life. I was mayor of the city of Newark, and I got called to be on a TV show. I got called by a guy named Skip Gates, who I love, admire, and he calls me and he jazzes me up. He fills my ego. He just flatters me. Hey, I got this show called Finding Your Roots, Cory Booker, and you're a rising star. You're this hot shot. We should feature you in this. And I'm like, oh, great. Oh, don't say that, Skip. But okay, yeah, of course. And then I said, okay, well, who are you going to pair me with? And I thought it was going to be another young hotshot, up-and-coming politician in America. No, he goes, I'm going to pair you with John Lewis. And my heart sank a little bit. Actually, maybe it was my ego that sank. My heart got excited because I know how these shows start. They start with biographies. And so imagine the show starting. John Lewis, hero of the civil rights movement, literally bled the southern soil red for freedom and justice. And then it goes to my biography. Cory Booker, riding his big wheel in suburban New Jersey. The show was unbelievable, mountain and boy. But I got to meet John Lewis. I got to tell him that story, that he changed my life, and I didn't even know it. On a bridge in Alabama, changed the course of events in New Jersey that led to me. Third take on John Lewis. My colleagues know I got here in a special election in 2013. What all my colleagues might not know is I came here with a broken heart. My mom and I came here with a broken heart because I was elected in October, sworn in October, but also in October, my dad died of Parkinson's. That's why I got choked up reading these letters from people with Parkinson's. And so we came down here, we were grieving. My dad was not with us. My mom lost her husband of nearly 50 years, and I'm going to get sworn in. It's a big event, but my parents and my campaign decided, you know what we should do? Right before you get sworn in or brought over here to be escorted to the president, vice president, that you should go and sit with John Lewis. And so we went to John Lewis's office, and a lot of my colleagues from the CBC, a lot of my colleagues from the House, a lot of my colleagues like here who came over to the House know his office. You walk into his office, and it looks like a civil rights museum, except he's in all the pictures. And this is John Lewis, we who knew him. This was him, mountain of a man. He had already prepared eggs and grits, a good Southern breakfast, and wouldn't let my mom and I get up, and he serves us all. And he humbly is saying, this is why I marched, this is why I sacrificed for history-making days like this. He told us how special this was for him. He told me that he would be right here where my friends are sitting, watching me get sworn in, and how proud he was going to be. In a sense, he stood in for my dad on this floor. And then boom, I'm a senator. I find colleagues and friends here, and I find a lot of colleagues and friends in the CBC. At that point, I was the only African American in our caucus and found so many friends, so many heroes that have gone up from the Senate now who looked at me, adopted me, helped me. Dick Durbin, you were amazing in those early months. And this is the next time I meet John Lewis for a moment that changed my life. Chris Murphy, Brian Schatz, remember this moment. It was during the 2017 healthcare debate when I didn't know how we were going to stop that bill from passing and taking away 20 million healthcare from 20 million Americans. But John Lewis, hey, Cory, let's do something different. What you got in mind? And I said, well, John Lewis, I got this phone. It's very powerful. Let's do a Facebook Live. And so I open it up, Facebook Live. We meet in the Capitol, and then he says, hey, where can we go to sit down for a place? And I love my favorite place to sit. I watch Schoolhouse Rock so much. It's right on the steps of the Capitol. Let's just sit there and talk. Chris Murphy, Brian Schatz, first people out to sit with us. And the time lapse is amazing. First 2, 3 people, then 10 people, then 50 people, then hundreds of people. I have it all. coming because of the moral magnetism of this man, John Lewis. And he talked to people that night who were looking for, what can I do? I'm just one person. And this guy who in his 20s, who was just one person and caused a heck of a lot of good trouble, he told them, don't lose faith, don't lose hope. Get angry, but let it fuel you. Be afraid, but know that's a necessary precondition to courage. He was amazing that night, and I know my colleagues remember that. And then there was the next time. Oh, Brother Warnock, you're going to love this one. The next time I was with John Lewis, Jimmy Carter had gotten a little sick. But then he got better and went back to teaching Sunday school. And I thought, this man is in his 90s. I need to go to Sunday school. And so who do I know? Because there's a waiting line. It's like people sleep out all night. I might have been a little selfish. How do I know I can get in? Call John Lewis. I say, hey, I got this great idea. Why don't we go to Jimmy Carter to watch him teach Sunday school? So I have the singular greatest road trip. I fly into Atlanta, we get into a car, and we drive all those hours to Plains, Georgia. Indeed, people were waiting outside, but it's John Lewis, come on in. We sit in the front row, I must be in the front row, and we sit down. And then this marvelous, incredible moment comes. Somebody comes and says, Congressman Lewis, Senator Booker, the President, First Lady would love to see you beforehand. It's my first time meeting President Jimmy Carter. But I walk in, I'm sort of on the sidelines. These two men are hugging each other. He and the First Lady. And the two of them whisper for a second, and Jimmy Carter walks over to me and says, I hear you're thinking about running for President of the United States. And he does something incredible. He says, I think you should run, but only if you run, and he pokes my heart, only if you run from here. The last time of the powerful moments I've had in my life with that man, that so many of us have had these powerful moments, the last time happened because of a man named Michael Collins. I know there are people in this room that got the same phone call I got, that it won't be long now, that John Lewis is going to pass very soon. He can't speak, but I know he would want you to have your moment to say goodbye to him. And what do I do? What do I do? To say goodbye to a man that's a legend in my life, a legend in our nation. What do you do to say goodbye to him? I wasn't prepared. I can't say I said anything eloquent. Michael Collins, God bless you, man. You put the phone by his ear and you just gave me my time to have a conversation with the man that would soon die. The man that changed my life, that helped my family get into a neighborhood that loved me and cherished me. God loved Harrington Park. The man who stood in for my father when heaven brought him home. The man that showed me on the steps of this Capitol how powerful the people are. It wasn't about him, it was about them. The man that brought me to see a president who flattered every senator's ego, tell them what they want to hear, run for president. And so I said everything I could, but the last thing I said I remember very well. I said, I love you. I said, I love you. And I said, John, I know you're going to be in heaven looking down on us. And I promise you, John Lewis, that I will do everything possible, that we'll do everything possible to make you proud. The civil rights generation is starting to be called home. Leaders are leaving us. We in the CBC have lost a lot of greats. And I can't remember forget the promise I made to John Lewis, with all that he gave me, with all that he gave his country, that I said we would make him proud. And so this is one of those moments that John Lewis, he would not be sitting still. He would call me up and say, you still got that Facebook thing? I go, no, I don't really use Facebook anymore. But there's a thing called TikTok or... I don't know what John Lewis would say right now. I know what he said in 2017, but I'll be honest with you, I don't know what he would say. But John Lewis would say something. He would do something. He wouldn't treat this moral moment like it was normal. John Lewis knew what King said, that what we have to repent for, all of us here will have to repent for, is not just the vitriolic words and violent actions of so-called bad people. What we will have to repent for in our day and age is the appalling silence and the inaction of good people. This is our moral moment. This is when the most precious ideas of our country are being tested, where the Constitution, and the question is being called, where does the Constitution live? On paper or in our hearts? This is the moment. Generations get them. We're on a crossroads here, folks. Healthcare is on the balance. Veterans are on the balance. Priorities are on the balance. Where's our priorities, America? More tax cuts disproportionately going to the wealthy? Greater budget deficits in the trillions and trillions of dollars? Or are we going to do something different like John Lewis would call us to do? He would call us to get into good trouble, necessary trouble, save the soul of America. But you all know John. Don't hate each other. Don't let anybody pull you so low as to hate them. I said this about the presiding elder. Different parties, but he showed me an act of kindness during this speech. He and I have talked about energy policy. He has amazing ideas. I want to partner with him. Don't hate anybody. Did the folks in Birmingham, did Martin Luther King, Fred Shuttlesworth, Dorothea Cotton, James Bevel, did they bring bigger dogs and bigger fire hoses to match the sheriff's? Bull Connor, thank you. I've been standing here a long time. They didn't do that. They were creative artists of activism. They called to the conscience of a country. They challenged our moral imagination, not to focus on hate, but focus on what is possible in America if we redeem the dream, if we dream America anew. That generation in their 20s and 30s, that's what they demanded. Martin Luther King didn't go to the March on Washington with a list of grievances against the racists in our country. He went there and called to the conscience of a country. He said he had a dream. That's what we need in our generation. Vision now. That's what we need in our generation. A vision to redeem the dream, to call our country together. Yes, there is a man in the White House who's the most powerful man in the land, and his partner is the richest man in the world. But as long as this is a democracy, that we can still protect, the power of the people is greater than the people in power if they use their power. As a great African-American woman author once said, the most common way people give up their power is not realizing they have it in the first place. I've been calling out names, folks, to tell them they have power. I read the stories of Deanna, of Wendy and Cassie, of Tanya, of Cameron, of Jean, of Susan, of Edna, of Randy, of Dylan, of Teresa, of Pamela, of Sally, of Mike, of Carol, of Rosemary, of Danielle, of Judith, of Elizabeth, of Sandra, Alicia, Maggie, Nibel, Laura, Michael, Robin, Mary, Allison, Ash, Roseanne, Carrie, Samantha P., Raphael, Will, Anthony, Sean, and so many more. I read their stories here because while we were elected, they are the power of our country. I've made mistakes. We all have. Both parties have a lot of mistakes to account for. The ballast of this country, what will anchor us to our ideals, what will call us to new heights, lift our heads, lift our hopes, what will call us to rise is each other. We need each other. We need a greater love in this country. We need a greater fight in this country. We need a greater determination. We can't act as if this is normal times. These people's stories that I wrote were calling out for help. Senator, help me. Someone help me. I'm in danger of losing my health care. Someone help me. I'm a veteran. Look what happened to me. It's not fair. I fought for this country. Help me, help me. I'm worried about my Social Security. And the rural office I go to is being closed. Help. People calling out for help. And what Americans do when people are calling out for help? They built an infrastructure. The greatest project ever, called it the Underground Railroad, where Quakers, white folks, joined with black folks to shuttle people to freedom. What did they do when people were worried and fearful? They called people together from across our country. Let's have a conference. Let's go to Seneca Falls. What did they do when they faced violence? Well, look at the people at Stonewall who stood up, who pushed back, who organized, who won. What do they do when the dogs are unleashed on us, the fire hose are unleashed on us? Look at what they did in Selma. I'm getting close to a record, folks, but there's a room here in the Senate named after Strom Thurmond. To hate him was wrong. And maybe my ego got too caught up that if I stood here, maybe, just maybe I could break this record of the man who tried to stop the rights upon which I stand. I'm not here, though, because of his speech. I'm here despite his speech. I'm here because as powerful as he was, the people were more powerful. But I remind you, all those people who believe like me that we've got to redeem the dream, turn again to John Lewis, because you all know the story, my colleagues, of when the man that beat him savagely, drew blood, cracked bones. Decades later, he was a congressman. That man brought his grandson with him to ask for forgiveness from John Lewis. I heard about this story when I was in the car in Georgia with him. What did you do, John? This man that so viciously beat you, wounded you, bruised you, battered you. What did you do when he came to ask you for forgiveness? What did you do? And a good Christian man of faith, simply said, every one of us needs mercy. Every one of us needs redemption. I forgave him. I hugged him. We wept. And I looked at the boy. This nation needs you too. John?
Would the senator yield for a question?
Chuck Schumer, it's the only time in my life I can tell you no.
I just want to tell you a question. Do you know you have just broken the record? Do you know how proud this caucus is of you? Do you know how proud America is of you?
Ladies and gentlemen, order. The chair does not wish to take away from this moment, but I think the best way to honor this great accomplishment to our guests in the gallery to make a rare exception and let you stand to show your appreciation. I will not constrain my fellow senators.
Thank you. Chuck Schumer, I have yielded for a question, and you asked me, did I know? I know now. I want to not quite wrap this up yet. I don't want to wrap this up yet. My mom's senator. My mom's been watching. I know Catherine Cortez Masto has a podium in front of her. She can give me a rest. I'd like to go a little further if we can, just a little further. I love, and again, I know people are trying to train each other, and all of our media operations, they give the worst images of the people of the other party. But I want to tell you, one of the funny tweets my staff gave me is something Ted Cruz said. Is he's around 19, 20 hours, he said, maybe I should pull a fire alarm. He's going to break my record. I'm going to pause in a moment if she has a question for me to Catherine Cortez Masto, because she's my mother. But I do want to just say again, 2 points to make if I can. One is how grateful I am to my staff. When we decided to do this many days ago, they were like, we have to do this. And we started preparing and working on this, and they did an extraordinary job. They were with me late nights, writing. I just feel guilty because they wrote about 10 books, and we didn't use all of them. They were really substantive stuff, pulling from Republicans and Democrats in critique of this moment, pulling from Democrats and Republicans, Republican governors that were saying, do not cut Medicaid. States that know, as my colleagues do, that have a trigger, that if the Medicaid funding goes below 90%, they stop the Medicaid expansion. My staff really worked hard to not make this just Democratic voices, to make it people in our country, that Republicans and Democrats, you heard mentioned in the speech, the Cato Institute, the Manhattan Institute, all people who are honest arbiters and are saying that what Trump is doing is wrong, that a budget like this that blows massive holes in our deficit, it will be something our children are trying to pay for. And what are they ultimately paying for that's caused this big deficit? It's trillions of dollars of tax cuts that people like Doge, multi-billionaire Musk will benefit from, but children won't. They did such a good job bringing together authorities on both sides of the aisle. I just want to thank them. I want to thank my cousin Pam and my family. Cousin Pam, like Chris Murphy, was here for the whole time. I want to thank Chris Murphy again. Who never stopped telling me we could do this, we can do this, we can do this, and said, I will stay with you. He's been with me on the floor. I hope you don't look as tired as I look, because you look beat, man. Do I look that bad? No. All right. I want to go a little bit past this, and then I'm gonna deal with some of the biological urgencies I'm feeling. But I'm going to wait here because I have the power, I have the floor. Somebody has to ask me, perhaps from my mom's state, the way that's supposed to work.
So will the good senator from New Jersey yield for a question?
My mom would be so upset with me, my Aunt Marilyn, my Uncle Butch, my Aunt Shirley, all the people that are your constituents, not mine, they would be upset with me if I didn't yield to you for a question while retaining the floor.
Well, first of all, Senator Booker, I have to say, we in Nevada are so proud of you. We are proud to be Nevada Strong. You are one of us. You are definitely New Jersey, Nevada Strong, and so proud of what you have accomplished so far, and willing to stay here as long as it takes to help you get your message across. And I think that's the important moment. We are all here right now. So I want to pose a question to you, actually a couple questions, but I want to start off and set the stage here, because you have been here now, for over 24 hours. You are missing some of the national news, things that are happening out there. But one of the things I want to point to that is happening that you may not be aware of, and you've touched on it a little earlier today, is this notion that we have now a president who is actually focused on billionaires and tax cuts for billionaires at the expense of the American public. And one of the things we have watched him do is cut funding for medical research. Now, what you may not know is just today I found out that HHS laid off the entire healthy aging branch of the CDC, just today. This office administers Alzheimer's disease programs.
Yes.
And it oversees the funding from the Bold Infrastructure for Alzheimer's Act, and it is a piece of legislation that I was so proud to partner with Susan Collins on. And she has fought for, and we have fought for, funding for it to support caregivers and their families. And Congress just reauthorized this funding. And now we have a president that has stopped the critical work that scientists are doing to try and cure Alzheimer's. And I bring this to your attention, Senator, because like you, and I think like all of us, there are personal moments in the work that we do. My personal moment is my grandmother, who I'm named after, died from Alzheimer's. And she died at a time in Las Vegas when there was not enough research, when there was not enough health care, when there were really not enough providers to understand what was going on. And so for many of us, this fight, not only is it personal, but we recognize the impact that it has outside the Beltway in so many families and lives across the country. And that's what this is about. In Nevada, as of 2023, there are 49,000 people, 65 and older, are living with Alzheimer's. And that's projected to reach 65,000 this year. Not only did we hear that HHS laid off the entire healthy aging branch of the CDC, but Donald Trump also recently terminated a $14,000 NIH research grant that had been supporting Alzheimer's research at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And he's continued to cut the grant for essential research for so many reasons. We've seen these funding cuts, we've seen mass layoffs, and the impoundment of grants that have already been approved by Congress. This is a violation of the rule of law, and you have been talking about that for the last couple of hours. President Trump is forgetting that this is personal. It is happening to so many families. So my question, Senator Booker, to you is, what do you think families and caregivers of those impacted by Alzheimer's, how they are feeling about what is happening right now?
So this bothers me for two reasons, and the first you've already mentioned, is this is the points of bipartisan work that we do. I talked about Chris Murphy and the bipartisan gun bill that lots of people here worked on with Senator Cornyn and others, and how upset my state is that some of that community violence intervention money that I worked so hard to get in that bill is being clawed back by a president. There are people in this room, I know so many of you, and I know on the other side, that have done such great work to work with our colleagues to find common ground and get really important programs passed that bring resources to families. And it's being clawed back by our president, not with consultation, not with a hearing, not with a discussion of even why you would target Alzheimer's research. That is a violation of the separation of powers. And I wish my Republican colleagues would hold more hearings about that. These are programs that they like. I saw that with USAID. I worked with Marco Rubio on some of that programs and those investments that are now been cut and clawed back. So it's a separation of powers issues. It's an offense to the common goals that we share in this community of leaders. But the second reason it bothers me is an article I read hours ago by Fareed Zakaria. And he talked about what's happening to a nation that cuts so dramatically what is one of the best taxpayer investment dollars in biomedical sciences. If you're an investor, and I told you there's an investment that every dollar you invest, you would get $5 back for your economy, folks would be invested in that vehicle. Well, that's NIH funding. Every dollar you invest, who would cut a profit center? It's not just a profit center, though. The outcomes, the discoveries, could change the lives of people who are suffering in your nation and around the world. But he's attacking them. I read all these universities from around the country. This shows you how magnanimous I'm trying to be. I even read stories from USC. I'm sorry, rival. That all of these universities are cutting their postdocs, cutting their PhDs, cutting the lending, because they don't know, as Donald Trump threatens, the direct costs they're stopping. And Fareed Zakaria said so painfully to all Americans with Americans' pride, as we are doing that, China, who, when they had that Cultural Revolution, they first went after their universities. Now, modern China, their government is doing the opposite. They're trying to out-America us. They're massively increasing their investments in scientific research because they know if they get ahead of us on quantum computing, all of our subs can be located, and God knows what could happen. They could, any kind of cryptology they could break. They know if they get ahead of us on scientific research, the power and advantage it will give them, so they're doubling down. But what are we doing in America? We're tolerating a president that is cutting the funding that will predict who defines the future and what values will define those futures. Will they be democratic values, or will it be the values of the country that's competing with us to beat us, and right now we're giving them a head start? And then the final reason that question bothers me is because my father died of Parkinson's, and he had Parkinson's-related dementia. And I know what that's like. I know the pain families are enduring. I remember the time that my dad and my mom, we were in the movie theater, and my mother just shook my world. She was in Georgia. And so many people here in this room have had the same experience. We're in a movie theater, and my mom leans over to me and said, "You need to take your dad to the bathroom." I never imagined the years of my dad as a 2-year-old and 3-year-old taking me to the bathroom, that one day I'd have to take him. And so in this Atlanta movie theater, in the middle of a movie, which I was like, okay, it's time for me to do this ritual that so many families know. I pick my dad up, who's shuffling with his Parkinson's. I'm not seeing any light in his eyes that he's there. I'm just letting him hold me, and he's shuffling into the bathroom. And then we get to a public bathroom. His hands are shaking. He's standing in front of the urinal, and then I realize I got to unbuckle this man's pants. So many families know this, and my ego, I'm sorry, I was leaning over and I'm saying, wait a minute, I'm in a public bathroom, leaning over, I'm buckling another man's pants. Please, please, God, don't let somebody come in. And as if God heard my call, someone walked in. And I hear the person walk, and I'm like, just please keep walking. Go into a stall, please keep walking. And then suddenly I hear the feet walk past me and stop. And then the man turns around and says, "Oh my God, Cory Booker." And then I look up at my dad, and I see the clarity in his eyes. He is 100% there, and he's grinning and loving my mortified embarrassment. Alzheimer's is devastating so many American families who are watching the loved one of their lives diminish. And we're cutting funding. Donald Trump is cutting funding, democratically, bipartisanly approved. So forget the separation of powers. It's important. It's so important. If that doesn't get you, then maybe think about the competition with China. If that doesn't get you, if those two don't get you, America, then think about the millions of Americans struggling with Alzheimer's, the struggles it does to those families. This is a moral moment, America. This is going to define the character of our country for years and years to come. Has the Senate called a hearing on your bipartisan funding, Senator? No. Have we done our oversight responsibility? Have we checked, as I read from the Federalist Papers, as our founders wanted us to do, is to check the executive, be the check at the executive that balances our governmental powers? No, we're not checking that executive. With Signalgate, I have heard from Republicans that serve in Congress, of the 535 with us. I know other colleagues here have heard. They're mortified. You talked about that. Mortified about that. And again, it's not partisan. The Biden administration made foreign policy mistakes. Obama made foreign policy mistakes. Reagan, when I was growing up, I was hearing about the Iran-Contra scandal. So I'm not going to be one of those people that the pristine, perfect Democrats. We've made mistakes. We've made failings. We've let the public down. We have some reckoning in our own party that we're working on right now. But that doesn't say that you should just be one of these people that says, well, Biden did it. No, you should be a leader of character that says there's something wrong here. And in fact, it could point to real problems in the national security of our country and the laws that we established. One of those laws is very simple. You're supposed to preserve records. How can a signal chain that disappears not be a violation of the law of this land? Is there a hearing on that? Head of the Intel Commission, not a hearing at all. Where are the checks and balances spelled out in the Constitution? We are derelicting our duties here in the Senate. We really are. And the consequences of that is the very national security of our country. How many times do you think this was the first time they created a signal chat? Or is this a pattern of practice? You're a really rational man. I keep looking at you, Mark. You're my leader on these issues. Or Jack Reed. No, this indicates a real problem, and the Senate, the United States Senate, should get to the bottom of it. This is a moral moment. I keep saying it's a moral moment. Who are we going to be? What's going to define us? And it's time not for the typical tribalism. It's time for leaders to start standing up and saying, you know what? We can go a different way. We can imagine a different country. That's why I pointed out the new leader of the Democratic Party on the House side. We're a different generation. There's a rising generation of people. I've talked about my friend who wrote this great book, Abundance. There's a whole bunch of new ideas out there that are about the future, about the possibilities, about the hope, about the greatness of America, not the greatness that is braggadocious, not the greatness that says, I'm better than you, not the greatness that says, only I can fix things. That's not the America we want. We want America that says, we the people. An America that says, e pluribus unum. An America says that our history shows that rugged individualism and self-reliance are important values, but rugged individualism didn't beat the Nazis. It didn't take us to the moon. We did that together, America. We need bigger visions that can unite us beyond our narrow partisan divides to get a real mandate. And you know what a real mandate should be? It should be government efficiency. It really should be. God, I have heard from so many of my colleagues on this side of the aisle that have said, if they formed a commission of former executives in this body, I see you, Maggie Hassan, it was hard, but I had to cut 24% of my budget, 1 out of 4 employees. It was really hard, caused a lot of pain, but we had to reduce my government. There are a lot of people here that are executives on both sides of the aisle that would have said, pick me, let's form the most exciting team possible. Because Jack Reed knows that the military of the United States of America could do things more efficiently. It's a little bit of waste over there because they haven't passed an audit. Where's Maria Cantwell? The Commerce Committee, so many ideas about how to create profit centers in the American government. You have talked to me about them. You're brilliant on some of these ideas. I look around here, but I could look to the other side of the aisle. The farmer sitting over there, the guy who's been so good to me, Chuck Grassley. I forced that man to hug me when we passed. I forced you to hug me, sir. I have pictures. Can't deny it. I don't know how you're going to get reelected now, sir. You hug this dude, black dude from New Jersey. You're so sweet to me still. We passed a big bipartisan bill because people like him, like the presiding officer, I've met with you, you still have big ideas. You still have big ideas that aren't partisan. If President Trump, from his inaugural address to his first speech before a joint session of Congress said, enough, there are big ideas in this country. I want the best. I want people to come together. I'm tired of us talking down at each other. It's time for us to come together and imagine ways to create real abundance in America for all Americans. I trust the genius of America, the kindness and the decency, but this president doesn't do that. He violates all of our common senses of decency. And don't say it doesn't happen, folks. Don't say that. I listen to him. I listen to how he talks about people. We have a government now, as I said earlier, that isn't ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. We have a country now where a president says, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for Donald Trump. And you're seeing who gets the special treatment. Some law firms are really threatened right now with being bankrupted by Donald Trump targeting them. Others have decided a different path. I'm not hating on them, but they said, we're going to go to Trump and we're going to offer him what he wants. We're going to give him tens of millions of dollars of free pro bono work. I wish they would bring some of that free pro bono work to Newark, New Jersey. A lot of people who need lawyers, folks in my city. What are the standards here of our government? You want a merger? Well, maybe you should put a lot of money in Donald Trump's meme coin. I read the document, there's something word called emoluments. And we sit by and act like, oh, no big deal. He's made millions and millions of dollars from who we don't know. We haven't held one hearing of oversight to know who is giving him millions of dollars to that meme coin. Is it the Turks? Is it the Saudis? Is it the Chinese? Is it the Russian oligarchs? Do we know? Should we know? Yes, America, stop falling into tribal lanes and closing your eyes to things that should not be normalized. Why are we normalizing these things? They're wrong. They're patently, on the face of it, is wrong. If you use signal to discuss a military attack, the time of the attack, the weapons that are going to be used, and you do it on a commercial app and decide to include a reporter, there should be accountability. Am I crazy?
Order. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just remind you, expressions of approval and disapproval are not permitted by the gallery. Thank you.
He was forced to say that. Look at you, defiant man. The Senate and the House should be checks and balances on the President of the United States. The Senate and the House should not allow business as usual in this moment when the President is insisting that no one has the power to check and balance him. When a judge does it, when a judge decides on the soundness of his legal observations to have a ruling, and then the President of the United States doesn't appeal the ruling like most people kind of do, but starts to drag and insult and threaten that judge with impeachment. And some people, astonishing to me, in our government said, oh, that's right, we should impeach this guy. That's not a question of left or right, that's a question of right or wrong. We're normalizing this behavior. We're letting him do things that Republicans and Democrats should say together are wrong. And so I want to say, I'm going to stop soon.
Well, for a question?
Oh, yes. God bless you. I will yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Thank you. I want to start, before I get to my question, with just saying how proud I am, how proud we all are of you. And I think I'm old enough to remember Strom Thurmond's filibuster. I can remember being in high school and seeing the news every night and the reporters coming from the steps of the Capitol because they were filibustering the Civil Rights Bill. And what I'm proud of is that your focus on democracy and the opportunities that democracy opens up for all of our rights, in my mind, cancels out what Strom Thurmond did to prevent African Americans and others from getting the rights they deserve in this country. So I'm proud of that. But I really want to, you talked earlier this afternoon about the rule of law and the overreach of this administration. And as part of that, you went through a litany of agencies that Congress had established that this president is trying to take away. And I just wanted to point out that, and you mentioned this earlier, one of those agencies that Congress established is the U.S. Agency for International Development. And earlier today, we had a shadow hearing roundtable, the Democrats on the Foreign Relations Committee. It was on the dangerous consequences of funding cuts to U.S. global health programs. And I know that as ranking member on the subcommittee on Africa and global health policy, you would have really been interested in this. I'm glad you were here on the floor, but I wish you could have heard what we heard from the people who testified. We heard from Atul Gawande, who used to be the administrator of USAID, their global health program. We heard from Dan Schwartz, who is the Vice President of Management Sciences for Health, that's a contractor that works on global health programs. And we heard from Nick Enrich, who's the former Assistant Administrator for Global Health at USAID. And they started out by talking about what global health has accomplished through USAID. PEPFAR has saved more than 26 million lives. It's reversed the spread of HIV/AIDS. They've done malaria prevention and control for over 500 million people. They've eradicated smallpox and eliminated most of polio. They've reduced infant mortality by more than 59% since 1990. They've supported cholera, measles, and Ebola outbreak response. And one of the things Dr. Gawande pointed out is that they took the response to Ebola outbreak from 2 weeks. Many of us remember that during the Obama administration when Ebola was coming to the United States. They took that response from 2 weeks down to 24 to 48 hours to be in there to be responding to the Ebola epidemic. And what has this president done? What has Elon Musk and Doge done? They've gone in to USAID. They've cut the global health workforce from over 800 to about 60. They've taken the system that was designed to make programs more efficient, and they dismantled it. And when the Inspector General Paul Martin reported on food rotting in ports, he was fired. USAID has been the largest civilian ground force to address global goals. As Dr. Gawande said, what we learned from USAID is that prevention is a whole lot more efficient and a lot cheaper than emergency treatment. He said that what we spend on global health through USAID has been $9 a household in America in a year. $9. Think about what we've done with that $9. And as they were going through the litany of programs that have been cut, the one that caught my eye was 75% of the pandemic threat comes from diseases jumping from animals to humans. That program has been terminated. 75% of the threat of future pandemics. So, as we think about rule of law and the overreach of this president, would you agree with me that there has been no consultation with Congress about any effort to move USAID into the Department of State, and that because Congress created this agency, Congress has got to be involved in reauthorizing whatever comes next, and that this president and his Doge boys need to understand that before they take any more steps at USAID?
Yes, yes, yes. You and I both know that in a bipartisan way, we created some of these programs principally to keep America safe. Many of us remember that dramatic hearing where Trump's Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, sat before the American people when they were discussing the budgets for USAID and the State Department. And John Mattis knew the power of those programs to keep us safe. You mentioned infectious diseases. Well, we live in a world where an infectious disease anywhere is a threat to public health everywhere. So pulling our scientists out of the fight against Ebola, pulling our scientists out of drug-resistant tuberculosis fights, it makes no sense. And then, in terms of our safety, he just simply said, if you cut these programs, buy me more bullets, because our fight's to spread democracy. There are nations in Africa, for example, where the Chinese are trying to influence a different way of life. That's why so many African countries now won't criticize China for things that the rest of the world say are bad, because they owe them so much debt, they're so engaged, they're so overplaying the fact. Chris Coons said something, I think it was Chris Coons said something painful earlier about Myanmar. This horrific thing. America, the most generous country on the planet, when there's a crisis, we lead the rest. I've sat in meetings in a bipartisan way with ambassadors from other countries where we had the moral authority to tell them, you're not doing enough. And in the Myanmar crisis right now, as Chris Coons said, who's standing there? Not Americans. We don't have the capacity anymore to help in a horrific crisis like that, but the Chinese government's there. Again, it's what defines us. I keep saying this is not a left-right moment. This is a moral moment, and we tell our truth with what we do with our resources. And here's the thing. When you poll people and ask them how much money you spend on USAID, they say, oh, it must be 10% of the American budget. It must be 5% of the American budget. It's around 1% or less. A penny of what tax dollars you send down to Washington goes to help us make sure that around the globe we're countering the hard power of some countries with the power of our light and our soft power. We have been the envy of the world, where people see and know how special America is, because we live the value of every major religion, that we're going to love our neighbors, we're going to be there for you in your times of need. And we all know, with a terrorist group from far away to the most horrific attack, that in a lot of these countries, terrorist groups are trying to counter the democratic governments there. Look in the Sahel region. Look what's happening. When I was in Nigeria, I was shocked to say what they're talking about: instabilities in the north, the threats of terrorism in the north. I'm going to go for 7 more minutes and stop, but I want to use these last 7 minutes to return one more time to the people of my state and actually other states who demanded we do things different, who asked for help. Before I do, I just want to thank Mike Lee today. He's my partner in antitrust, a specialty of my friend Amy Klobuchar. And I don't know if you got my text, but you got it, where I said to you, I'm kind of going to the floor to hold it for as long as I can. And I may not make our first subcommittee together on antitrust, where we have a lot of common ground. So I'm sorry I missed it today. I know you'll fill me in, but I know my friend filled in. Thank you. So I want to close back where we started, about us, about why I'm here. I believe that there is an urgent crisis in our country that we are not talking about. It's not a left-right crisis, it's a right-wrong crisis. It's a moral moment, and again, in America, that's going to define our character, about who we are and what we stand for. There's a threat to the bedrock commitments we've made to each other as a country. People are threatening that bedrock commitment of Social Security. They're calling it a Ponzi scheme. They're making up absolute lies about it. When I read American after American who said that that is their lifeline, they told stories that if they don't get their Social Security payment, or they get caught up because nobody's answering their calls, if the rural Social Security office, I read states, red and blue, where they're closing Social Security offices, if I now have to drive not 100 miles, but 150 miles at 93 years old, it doesn't quite make sense. One of my colleagues stood up here and said, that's already a cut in benefits if you can't access the folks. I stood here because there's a threat to these bedrock commitments. The bedrock commitment we've made in healthcare in this country. We won the defense of the Affordable Care Act, but my colleagues know when you start talking about Medicaid, that's not 20 plus million Americans. It's 70, 80, 90 million Americans. It's our elders in nursing homes. It's our children with disabilities. It's our moms giving birth that are still giving birth in the country with about the highest maternal mortality rates in the industrial world. It's a moral moment. Who do we stand for? Like Schumer shocked me when he said they're going to use some kind of budget gimmick to push this through. He shocked me, Chuck. I thought this was going to come down to the parliamentarian, but it doesn't sound like it. Now it's just going to get done. With the math, and I read from Manhattan Institute criticized it on the right. AEI criticized it on the right. They said, what are you doing? What are you doing, America? You're going to rake up trillions and trillions of dollars in debt that our children and our children's children are going to have to pay for, passing the bucks that will grow. Are you doing that to help people get more access to health care, more access to retirement security, more access to the things we believe in, big ideas like universal child care, paid family leave? No, we're doing that in order to renew the tax cuts that I read conservative budget folks, moderate budget folks, all across the spectrum who said it will blow up our deficit. And the benefits of those tax cuts, not all, let's not use hyperbole, but most will go to the richest people in our country who I promise you, I celebrate people who've brought their ingenuity and their expertise and their grit and their tireless work who've built wealth in this country. Should not be us versus them, but I'm telling you that those folks do not need another tax cut. And the corporations who came here, you all remembered, said we would like a 25% rate. The people I read said that when we kicked it to 21, not even what they were asking for from 35, it exploded. One of the main reasons it exploded our debt. And we read from conservative groups who just said all these promises that we would grow our way out of our deficit, they didn't materialize. All the promises that were made. Trump, for those who don't remember or weren't here when I read it, was going around telling folks that, oh, my tariffs, this is 2017, my tariffs, the money that I get, that will be what we could pay down the debt. The math that they did was that would account for about 1/750th of the debt at that time. But he used that money to try to compensate the farmers that he was hurting with his tariffs. This is a moral moment, and people are getting hurt, and people are afraid because of the threats to Medicaid cuts. There were people writing in and said $880 billion would devastate me, but even small cuts to services, my whole family, fragile architecture of our finances, if you just pull out the transportation money that my disabled child uses, that will crumble my financial world. And so when you talk about the bigger cuts, we know the math. Many states who expanded Medicare have a trigger that if it goes below 90%, all the Medicare expansion goes off in that state and millions of Americans will be hurt. That's not right, guys. That's not right. And so this is the choices we have before us. Our veterans and the VA. I'm mad at you now. You made me get very emotional with your story. We read John McCain's story. We read the stories of the poems of the unknown soldier looking over us and saying, what are you doing to the Gold Star families? What are you doing to the veterans? Are you living up to your promises that you made? Well, right now, with the cuts of tens of thousands, over 80,000 veterans who work for the VA, but even more, because about 20% or so of all federal workers are veterans. And we read stories from veterans in America who are shaken by what's happening, who are losing their jobs, but yet all they want to do is serve. They're not what they're being called. They're not leeches. They're not criminals. They shouldn't be degraded for wanting to continue to serve their nation. This is what we're talking about, our veterans, our seniors, our health care, our financial security going forward. I asked the question to all those people who voted for Donald Trump, who believed in him that he would lower your grocery prices. I asked you, look at your financial self. Are you better off than you were 72 years ago financially? Well, the answer for most people who believed in him is no, because he didn't set out to do anything to lower prices. He set out to rename the Gulf of Mexico, to threaten Canada, to say I'm going to take over Greenland. He's done a lot of things, 140 executive orders. Many of them actually drive up your costs, make it more expensive to enroll in the ACA, reduce a lot of the tax credits there. He's increased your costs. He's taxed your bedrock services. Stock market tumbles, your 401k accounts are less. Inflation is up. Consumer confidence is down. This is what the voices we brought into this chamber, the voices of our constituents, red states, blue states, the voices of Democrats and Republicans, Republican governors, Democratic governors. We brought all the people that are saying, no, this is a moral moment, not left or right, right or wrong. And so I've tried over the last 25 hours and 1 minute to center the conversation back on what will we do of good conscience. People who are saying, I served this country, I risked my life, shouldn't be able to keep my job. People who are saying, this country once made itself the envy of the world because we invested in high quality education for every child. I don't like what's going on at the end of the Department of Education. People who are saying, I worked harder than I ever have, but the prices on everything in my life are getting higher. People who are saying that the America I learned about in school, the one where people's rights are protected, the people are saying that why are we yet again going through another healthcare battle that threatens millions of people, the people are saying that I'm worried about the financial security and the future of my country, the voices of folks. And so I end by saying simply this, where I started was John Lewis. I don't know how to solve this. I don't know how to stop us from going down this road. Chuck Schumer's now told me that they're greasing the skids to do these things. I'm sorry. But I know who does have the power. The people of the United States of America. The power of the people is greater than the people in power. It is time to heed the words of the man I began this whole thing with, John Lewis. I beg folks to take his example of his early days where he made himself determined to show his love for his country at a time the country didn't love him, to love this country so much, to be such a patriot that he endured beatings savagely on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, at lunch counters, on freedom rides. He said he had to do something. He would not normalize a moment like this. He would not just go along with business as usual. He wouldn't know how to solve it. But there's one thing that he would do that I hope we all can do that I think I did a little bit of tonight. He said for us to go out and cause some good trouble, necessary trouble, to redeem the soul of our nation. I want you to redeem the dream. Let's be bold in America, not to mean and degrade Americans, not divide us against each other. Let's be bolder in America with a vision that inspires, with hope that starts with the people of the United States of America. That's how this country started. We, the people. Let's get back to the ideals that others are threatening. Let's get back to our founding documents, that those imperfect geniuses had some very special words at the end of the Declaration of Independence. It was one of the greatest in all of humanity declarations of interdependence. When our founder said we must mutually pledge to each other, our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. We need that now from all Americans. This is a moral moment. It's not left or right, it's right or wrong. Let's get in good trouble. My friend, Madam President, I yield the floor.